page 96. Last headword was appraisal. Newer type of
Okay.
lesson. Okay, let's start with revision. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, I'm ready.
Which
Yes.
which department would you contact to get software update or new hardware installed at
Okay.
work? Which department would you contact to get software update or new hardware installed at work? I'd contact the
I'd contact
IT
the
department
IT
to get
department
software
to get
update
a software
or
update
new hardware
or new
installed at
hardware
work.
installed at work.
Very good. Okay, give me an example of the idiom in the loop. Give me an example of the idiom in the loop, please. There's not much
There's
point
not much
asking
point
Simon
asking
about the
Simon
project.
about the
He's
project.
not really in the
He's
loop.
not really in the loop.
Very good. Why is a worker's net income smaller than their gross income? Why is a worker's net income smaller than their gross income? A worker's net
A
income
worker's
is
net
smaller
income is
than their gross
smaller
income
than their gross income
because net
because
income
net
is the
income
money that
is the
remains
money that
after
remains
tax
after
and other
tax
necessary
and other
payments
necessary
have
payments
been deducted
have been
from the
deducted
gross income.
from the gross income.
Very good. Give me an example of the phrase best practice. Give me an example of the phrase best practice, please. When planning its
When planning
development
its
of the new
development
airport,
of the new
the
airport,
government followed
the government
best
followed
practice at
best
every
practice
stage.
at every stage.
Greg, why is it a good idea to read an email thread carefully before forwarding the email to someone?
To
Why is it
someone.
a good idea to read an email thread carefully before forwarding the email to someone? It's a good idea
It's
to
a good
read an
idea
email
to
thread
read an email
carefully
thread
before
carefully
forwarding
before
the email to
forwarding
someone
the email to
so you
someone
can remove
so you can remove
unimportant or confidential
unimportant or
information
confidential
and
information
comments you don't want
and comments
the
you don't
person to
want
read.
the person to read.
Where again, if the total cost involved in making a product amount to £400 and the selling price is £500, what's the markup? If the total cost involved in making a product amount to £400 and the selling price is £500, what is the markup?
£500. What is the
If
markup?
the total cost
If the total
involved
cost
in making a
involved in
product
making a
amount
product
to
amount to
£400
400
and the
pounds
selling
and the
price
selling
is
price is
£500,
500
the
pounds,
markup is
the markup is
25%.
25%.
And what's the profit margin? What's the profit margin?
Profit
The
margin?
profit
The
margin
profit
is
margin is
20%.
20%.
Very good. If you were in charge of logistics for a conference attended by international delegates, what would you have to organize? If you were in charge of the logistics for a conference attended by international delegates, what would you have to organize? If I were in
If
charge
I were in
of the
charge
logistics
of the
for a
logistics
conference
for a conference
attended by
attended
international
by an
delegates,
international
I'd
delegate,
have to
I'd
organize
have to
transport
organize
from the
transport
airport
from
to
the
the
airport
accommodation,
to the accommodation,
transport to the conference
transport to the
venue,
conference
the
venue,
provision of food
the provision
and
of
drink
food
at the
and
venue,
drink at the venue,
etc.
etc.
Ragged, when a senior member of staff is snowed under, how can they take some of the pressure off themselves? When a senior member of staff is snowed under, how can they take some of the pressure off themselves? When a senior member
When a
of
senior
staff
member
is
of the
snowed
staff
under,
is not snowed
they
under,
can take
they
some
can
of
take
the
some
pressure
of the
off
pressure
themselves
off
by
themselves
delegating
by
certain tasks
delegating
to other
certain tasks
people.
to other people.
Very good. When choosing a method of transport for the distribution of its product, what should a business consider? When choosing a method of transport for the distribution of its products, what should a business
What
consider?
should business consider?
When choosing a method
When
of
choosing a
transport
method of
for the
transport
distribution of
for the
its products,
distribution of
a
its
business
product,
should
a
consider
business should
things
consider
such as
things
cost,
as cost, such as cost,
speed, how reliable the method of transport is. Okay,
such as
one more.
sorry, say,
When
yeah.
choosing a method of
When choosing a
transport
method,
for the
hmm,
distribution, no? When choosing
sorry,
a method
when
of
choosing a method
transport
of
for
transport
the distribution
for the
of its
distribution
products,
of its
a
product,
business should
a
consider
business
things
should consider
such
things
as cost,
such as cost,
speed, how
speed,
reliable the method
how
of
reliable the
transport
method
is,
of transport is,
etc.
etc.
Ragged, what do we mean by a distribution channel? What do we mean by a distribution channel?
distribution channel.
By a distribution
By a
channel,
distribution
we
channel,
mean the
we
way
mean
the
a
goods
way
reach
the
the
goods
final
reach the
consumer.
financial
For
consumer.
example, from
For
a
example,
factory
from
to
a
a
factory
wholesaler,
to a wholesaler,
then on to a
then
retailer,
on to a
and
retailer,
finally to the
and
consumer.
finally to the consumer.
Very good. What do we mean by brainstorming? What do we mean by brainstorming?
Brainstorming.
By brainstorming,
By
we mean a
brainstorming, we mean
situation
a
where a
situation
group of
where a
people
group of
is
people
spontaneously
is
thinking
continuously
of
thinking
and
of
suggesting
and
ideas,
suggesting ideas,
usually to deal with a
usually to
business
deal with
issue.
a business issue.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. We need a
We need
brainstorming
a
session
brainstorming
to get
session
fresh
to get
ideas
a fresh
for our
idea
next
for
marketing
our next
campaign.
marketing campaign.
Very good. Which areas of business does an internal audit usually inspect?
We should
Which
expect
areas of a business does an internal audit usually inspect? An internal audit
an internal
usually
audit.
inspects a
Usually
business
inspect a
financial
business
accounts
financial
and other
accounts
records,
and other
but can
records
also
that
cover
can also cover
operational procedures,
operational procedures,
governance, internal
governance,
controls,
internal
etc.
controls, etc.
Who normally performs an internal audit? Who normally performs an internal audit? Accountants or
Accountants
auditors
or
who
auditors
are employed
who are
by the
employed
company
by the
normally
company
perform
normally
an
perform
internal audit.
an internal audit.
Internal audit. One more. Accountants
Okay,
or
accountants
auditors
or
who are
auditors
employed by the
who are
company
employed by the
normally
company
perform
normally
an
perform
internal audit.
an internal audit.
Very good. What does an auditor's report usually reveal? What does an auditor's report usually reveal? An auditor's
An
report
auditor's report
usually reveals
usually reveals
whether records
whether
are
records
adequate
are
and correct
adequate and
and
correct
identifies
and
weaknesses
identifies
in the
weaknesses
business,
in the
such as
business, such
areas
as
where there's
areas
an
where
excessive
there is
risk
an excessive
or
risk
where
or where
opportunities of fraud
opportunities
exist.
of fraud exist.
Very good. Now, very good. Okay, so what's the main purpose of an external audit? What's the main purpose of an external audit? The main purpose
The
of
main
an
purpose
external
of
audit. The main
external audit,
purpose, one more,
the
the
main
main
purpose
purpose of an external
of an
audit
external audit
is to report
is to
on whether
report
a
on
company
whether our
is
company
meeting its
is meeting
statutory
its
financial
statutory
obligations
financial
and to
obligation
inform
and to
shareholders
inform
whether
shareholders
the company's
whether the
financial
company
statements
financial
are
statements
adequate and correct.
are adequate and correct.
Very good. Are large companies in your country obliged by law to have an external audit of their
External audit
financial
of the
statements carried
financial
out each
statement
year?
carried out
Are
here.
large companies in your country obliged by law to have an external audit of their financial statements carried out each year? Yes or no?
Yes,
Large companies
large
in my
companies
countries
in my
are
country
obliged by
are
law
obliged by
to have
law
an
to
external
have
audit
an external
of their
audit
financial
of their
statements
financial
carried
statement
out each year.
carried out each year.
Very good. Do you think most employees view their annual appraisal as a source of valuable feedback or a waste of everybody's time? Do you think most employees view their annual appraisal as a source of valuable feedback or a waste of everybody's time? I think most
I think
employees
most
view
employees
their annual
view
appraisal
their annual appraisal
as
as
what? Valuable, a source of valuable feedback or a waste of everybody's
yeah,
time?
source of
Okay, one more.
variable feedback.
I
Yeah,
think
okay.
most
I think
employees
most
view their
employees
annual
view
appraisal
their
appraisal
annual appraisal
as a source of
as a
valuable
source
feedback.
of variable feedback.
Very good. Okay, and that's the end of our revision. Let's have
Mm,
new work.
okay.
That's correct. Okay, so let's start new work. Okay, repeat. Show of hands.
Show of hands.
Ballot.
Ballot.
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
Consensus.
Consensus.
Deadlock.
Deadlock.
Casting vote.
Casting vote.
Very good. Okay, listen. Show of hands is a noun. It is
Is
an
an
occasion when people in a
occasion when
room vote
people
by
in a
putting their
room
hands
vote
up.
by putting their hands up.
For example, it's probably not appropriate in a
Not
meeting to
appropriate
vote
in a
by a
meeting
show of
to vote by a
hands
show
in
of hands
circumstances
in
where the
circumstances
decision is
where the
sensitive,
decision is
such
sensitive,
as a vote to elect
such as
someone
vote to
from
elect
among the
someone from
participants
among
in the
the
meeting.
participants in the meeting.
Ballot is a noun.
Ballot is
It is a
a
piece of paper
piece of
that you
paper
write your vote
you
on.
write and vote on.
Unanimous is an adjective.
Unanimous
It means
adjective.
an unanimous decision, vote, agreement, etc.
Agreement,
Is
etc.
one that everyone agrees with
Everyone
and support.
agrees. Mm.
Consensus is a noun. It
Consensus
is an
is a noun.
agreement among all the
Agreement
people involved.
it's involved.
Deadlock is a noun. It is a
Deadlock.
situation in which
Situation
neither
in which
person or group
neither person or
involved
group
in a
involved
disagreement
in a
is willing to
disagreement
change
is
their
willing to
opinions
change their
or position.
opinions or positions.
Casting vote is a noun. It means the vote that gives one
Vote
group a
gives one
majority
group a
when the other
majority,
votes are
other
equally
vote
divided.
equally divided.
The person in charge of a
Person in
committee,
charge
for
of a committee
example, often has the right
had
to
the
give a
right
casting vote.
to give a casting
For
vote.
example, if there's a lack of
A
consensus
lack
among
of consensus
participants
among
and a
participants.
vote results in
The
a
vote
deadlock,
result in a
the
deadlock.
chair normally has
The
the
chair
casting
normally
vote.
has the casting vote.
Very good. Let's practice. In what circumstances is it probably not appropriate in a meeting to vote
In a
by a show
meeting
of
to vote by
hands?
show of hands.
In what circumstances
What
is it probably
is
not
it probably
appropriate
not
in a
appropriate
meeting
in
to
a
vote
meeting
by a
to
show of
vote
hands?
by a show of hands?
It's probably not
It's
appropriate
probably not
in a
appropriate
meeting to
in a
vote by
meeting
a
to
show of
vote by
hands
a show of
in
hands
circumstances
in
where the
circumstances
decision is
where the
sensitive,
decision is
such
sensitive,
as a vote
such
to
as a
elect
vote
someone
to elect
from among
someone
the
from
participants
among the
in the
participants
meeting.
in the meeting.
What would be a better way of voting in such circumstances? What would be a better
Would
way
be
of
a better
voting in
way
such
of
circumstances then?
circumstances.
A better way
A
of
better
voting
way of
in
voting
such
in
circumstances
such
would
circumstances
be to hold a
would
ballot.
be to hold a ballot.
Very good. Which adjective describes a vote in which everybody agrees?
Everybody
Which
agrees.
adjective describe a vote in which everybody agrees? The adjective
The
unanimous
adjective
describes
unanimous
a vote
describes a
in
vote
which everybody
in which
agrees.
everybody agrees.
Where if there's a lack of consensus among participants and a vote results in a deadlock, who normally has the casting vote? If there's a lack of consensus among participants and a vote
Participants
results in a
a
deadlock,
vote in a
who
deadlock.
normally has the casting vote? If there's a lack of
If there's a lot
consensus
of
among
consensus
participants
among
and a vote
participants and
results
a
in
vote
a
result
deadlock,
in a
the
deadlock,
chair normally
the
has
chair
the casting
normally
vote.
has a casting vote.
Very good. Next, go bust.
Go bust.
Very good. Okay, listen. When we say a company has gone bust, we
Go
mean
bust.
it has been forced to close because of
Forced
lack
to
of
close
money
because of lack of
and has
money.
perhaps gone into
Has
liquidation,
perhaps done
gone bust like
liquidation.
bankrupt
Gone bust,
or
bankrupt.
insoluble. Let's practice. Okay. Name a well-known company that's gone bust in recent years. Name a well-known company that's gone bust in recent years. The name of
The
a
name
well-known
of a
company
well-known
that's
company
gone bust
that's gone
in
bust
recent years
in
is,
recent years is
do you know one?
oh
Let's just say ABC Company.
yeah, okay, sorry. ABC company,
Yeah,
yeah,
me too. I don't have any idea.
yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, now let's have abbreviation. Okay,
Abbreviation.
very good. So, when doing, okay, so here we go. Let's have this one. Okay, REF or reference,
REF or reference.
PS or postscriptum,
PS or postscript.
scriptum.
Scriptum.
Very good.
Scriptum.
Oh, it's a Latin. Okay, next. SAE or stamp address envelope or
S
self-addressed envelope.
SAE or a stamped addressed envelope or a self-addressed envelope.
Very good. And last one, MISC or miscellaneous.
MISC or miscellaneous.
Very good. Okay, so let's practice. What do the following abbreviation mean and how are they used in business
The use in business
correspondence? What do
correspondence.
the following abbreviation mean and how are they used in business correspondence? REF means, okay,
REF means
reference and is
reference
followed by a
and
colon
is followed by
and
a
then
colon
some numbers
and then
and
some
or
numbers
letters.
and or
These
letters.
numbers and letters
These numbers and
identify
or
a
letters
particular
identify
document
a particular
or matter
document
that the
or
writer
matter
is
that the
referring to.
writer is referring to.
Very good. PS
Okay.
means
PS means
postscriptum,
postscriptum,
which is Latin for
which is
after
Latin
writing.
for after
It's an
writing.
informal abbreviation
It's an informal
that can be
abbreviation
placed after
that
the
can
end
be
of a
placed
letter
after the end
When
a
we want
letter.
to add more
When
text.
we want when we want to add
More text.
more more text.
Very good. SAE is an
SAE
abbreviation
is an
that stands
abbreviation
for Stamp
that
Addressed
stands
Envelope,
for
Stamp
stamp to
Addressed
addressed
Envelope,
envelope
or Self-Addressed Envelope.
or self-addressed envelope.
Very good. MISC is an abbreviation
MISC
of the
is an
word
abbreviation
miscellaneous,
of the word
an
miscellaneous,
adjective describing
an adjective
a
describing
group of different things
a
that
group of
don't
different
belong to
things
any
that don't
particular
belong
category.
to any particular category.
Very good. Okay, next repeat. Equity.
Equity.
Very good. Okay, listen. Equity. When a business borrows money from a bank,
From
the
the
bank
bank,
doesn't have
the
equity
bank
in the
doesn't have
business, but
equity in
it
the
does
business.
become a creditor.
It does become a creditor.
When we talk about our equity in a property or
Our equity
business,
in a
we mean
property
the
or
value
business,
of
we
what
mean the
we
value
own
of what
minus the
we own
related
minus the
liabilities.
related
For
liabilities.
example, if we own a house worth
On the house
£400,000
£400,000,
and our mortgage is only
our market
£100,000,
£100.
then we have
We have
£300,000 of equity
£300,000
in the
of
property.
equity in the property.
Very good. Yeah, let's practice. If your mortgage on a property is £150,000, but the property itself was worth £750,000, how much
£750,000.
equity would you
How
have?
much equity would you
If
have?
your mortgage on a property was
Mortgage is
£150,000,
£50,000,
but the property itself
but the property
was worth
itself was worth
£750,000, how much
£750,000.
equity would you
How
have?
much equity would you have?
If my mortgage on
If
a
my mortgage
property
on a
was
property was
£150,000, but the
£150,000,
property itself
but the property
was worth
itself was worth
£750,000, my
£750,000,
equity would be
my equity would be
£600,000.
£600,000.
Very good. When a business borrows money from a bank, does the bank then have equity in the business? When a business borrows money from a bank, does the bank then have equity in the business? No. If a business borrows
No,
money
if a
from a
business
bank,
borrows money
the bank
from a
doesn't
bank,
have
the
equity
bank
in the
doesn't
business,
have equity
but it
in the
does become
business,
a creditor.
but it does become a creditor.
Very good. Next, repeat. Cargo.
Cargo,
Consignment.
consignment,
Very good. Okay, listen. Cargo is a noun. It means things that are being sent by
things
ship,
that have been sent
airplane,
by
train, or
ship,
truck.
airplane, train, or truck.
Consignment is a noun. It means an
Consignment
amount
are
of
not
goods that are delivered. For example, I
delivered.
imagine the cheapest way to
Maybe the
transport
cheap
large
way
cargo
to transport
consignment is
large
by
cargo
sea.
consignment is by sea.
Okay, let's practice. Which do you imagine is the cheapest way to transport large cargo consignment? By air, by rail, or by sea? Which do you imagine is the cheapest way to transport large cargo consignment? By air, by
Consignment
rail, or
by
by
air,
sea?
by rail, or by
I
sea.
imagine the
I
cheapest way
imagine the cheapest
to
way
transport large
to
cargo
transport large
consignment
cargo
is
consignment is by sea.
by sea. Very good. Okay, next repeat. Going concern.
Going concern,
Going concern. Very good. Okay, next. Reserves.
reserves,
Turnaround.
turnaround.
Very good. Okay, listen. So in business, going concern is a company that has the
Company
financial
that has the
resources
financial
to
resources
continue trading
to
and does
continue
not
trading
expect to
and does
close
not
down
expect to
in the near
close
future.
down in
If
the
the
near future.
company is not a going concern, it has
Going
an
concern,
obligation to
it has
declare the fact.
obligation to declare the fact.
Okay. For example, it isn't like you'd be able to maintain a
You'll be able to
business as a
maintain a
going
business as a
concern
going
if
concern
it was operating at a loss and the company had no reserves.
under no reserves.
Okay, the word reserves is a noun. It is a supply of something like
Supply
money
of something
that a
like
business
money
can
that a
use
business
when
can
they
use
need to.
when they need to.
Turnaround is a phrasal verb. It
Yes,
means to stop being
to stop
unsuccessful
being
and to start
successful,
being successful.
start being successful.
For example, to try to turn the
Try to
business
turn
around.
business
One
around.
more. To try to turn the business
To
around.
to try to
Huh?
try
To
hmm?
turn the business
ah,
around,
to try to turn business
they
around.
could cut back on
They
spending,
could cut back
perhaps by
on spending,
reducing
perhaps by
overheads,
reducing
payrolls,
overheads,
etc.
payrolls, etc.
Very good. Let's practice. Is it likely you'd be able to maintain a business as a going concern
as
if
a
it
going
was
concern if
operating
it
at a
was
loss and the
operating at a
company
loss
had
and
no
the company had
reserves?
no
Is
reserves.
it likely you'd be able to maintain a
Maybe
business
to
as a
maintain a
going
business.
concern if it was operating at a loss and the company had no reserves? No, it
No,
isn't likely.
it isn't
I'd be
likely
able to
I'd be
maintain a
able to
business
maintain a
as a
business
going
as
concern
a going
if it
concern
was
if
operating
it
at a
was
loss
operating
and the
at a loss
company had
and the
no
company
reserves.
had no reserves.
Megan, what could you do to try to turn the business around? What could you do to try to turn the business around? To try to turn
To try to
the business
turn
around,
the business
I could cut back
around,
on
I
spending,
could cut back on
perhaps by
spending,
reducing
perhaps
overheads,
by reducing
payroll,
overheads,
etc.
payroll, etc.
Very good. Okay, so now let's move on to reading.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So our reading is at page 62. Last headword was direct cost. Okay, let's start at page 63. When the direct and indirect costs for a particular product is considered
The
together.
direct and indirect. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
When the direct and indirect costs for a particular product are considered together, which term do we use? When the direct and indirect cost for a particular product